Let me in right now! I know she's inside! Open this door!
My name is Ethan Rowe, and 3 weeks ago, my wife told me she would decide when we spend time together. Not discuss it, not negotiate it. Decide it, like I was some kind of pet she could summon when convenient. So I decided to disappear. Not physically, you understand? I still went to work at Dataflow Solutions, still paid the mortgage on our downtown apartment, still existed in the same space-time continuum as Julia, but I stopped trying. No more good morning texts, no more asking about her day, no more suggesting dinner plans or weekend trips. I became a ghost in my own marriage, and the funny thing, it took her exactly 17 days to notice. Ethan, we need to talk. Julia stood in our kitchen doorway, still wearing her charcoal business suit from Pinnacle Marketing. Her auburn hair was pulled back in that severe bun she favored for client meetings, and her green eyes had that calculating look I'd learned to recognize over our 4 years of marriage. I continued scrolling through code on my laptop, debugging a client's database issue. About what? You know what? She moved closer, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. You've been acting strange, distant. Nate says you haven't been returning his calls either. Ah, Nate. My best friend since college, loyal as a golden retriever and about twice as gullible. Of course Julia would recruit him as her spy. I looked up from my screen, meeting her gaze with the most neutral expression I could manage. Strange how? Don't play games with me. Her voice carried that edge she used with difficult clients. You barely speak to me anymore. You leave for work without saying goodbye. Last weekend you went to the gym for 4 hours without telling me where you were going. I thought you were busy. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair. You've been working so many late nights lately. All those important projects with Dean. Before we deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Something flickered across her face at the mention of Dean Malice, her colleague and self-proclaimed work husband. A micro-expression that lasted maybe half a second, but I caught it. Guilt, maybe, or fear. Dean and I are working on the Henderson account. You know how demanding Mr. Henderson can be. Right. The Henderson account? I stood up, stretching. The one that requires so many evening strategy sessions and weekend brainstorming retreats and those mysterious conference calls at 11 p.m. Julia's jaw tightened. What exactly are you implying? Nothing at all. I'm sure Dean is very thorough in his strategic planning. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could practically see the wheels turning in her head. Julia had always been calculating, but lately she'd become something else entirely. Manipulative. Cold. Like she was playing a game where only she knew the rules. I don't like this version of you, she said finally. Funny. I was thinking the same thing about you. That night, after Julia went to bed, I sat in my home office and thought about how we'd gotten here. 4 years ago, Julia had been charming, ambitious, full of life. She'd laugh at my sarcastic jokes, drag me to art galleries and wine tastings, make elaborate plans for our future. Now she treated me like an inconvenience, something to be managed rather than loved. The change had been gradual at first. Longer hours at work, less interest in our conversations, a new obsession with fitness that coincided with Dean joining her gym. But the real shift happened 3 months ago when she started coming home smelling like cologne that wasn't mine. My phone buzzed with a text from Nate. Dude, Julia called me. Says you're having some kind of midlife crisis. What's going on? I typed back, just reevaluating my priorities. Want to grab a drink tomorrow, talk it out? Sure, but leave Julia out of it. The next evening, Nate and I met at Murphy's Pub, a dimly lit place near the university where we used to hang out in college. Nate looked concerned, his round face creased with worry lines that made him look older than his 34 years. So, what's really going on? He asked after we'd ordered our beers. Julia says you've been acting weird for weeks. Define weird. You know what I mean. Withdrawn, antisocial. She's worried about you. I took a long sip of my beer, considering how much to tell him. Nate meant well, but he had the discretion of a megaphone and the strategic thinking of a golden retriever. Did she mention why she might be worried? She thinks you're having an affair. I nearly choked on my drink. She thinks what? She asked me if you'd mentioned any women at work, if you'd been acting secretive about your phone, if you'd been going out at unusual times. Nate leaned forward, lowering his voice. Are you? Am I what? Having an affair. I laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the pub's brick walls. Nate, when exactly would I have time for an affair? I work 50 hours a week debugging other people's mistakes. I spend my evenings doing laundry and grocery shopping while Julia works late with Dean. My most exciting social interaction is arguing with customer service representatives. So, what's with the cold shoulder treatment? Maybe I'm tired of being taken for granted. Nate nodded slowly, like he was processing this information. She does work a lot lately, always talking about that Henderson project. Right, the Henderson project. I signaled the bartender for another round. Tell me something, Nate. How long have you known me? 12 years. In all that time, have you ever known me to be the jealous type? The controlling type? The type to throw tantrums when I don't get attention? No. So if I'm suddenly giving Julia space, maybe there's a reason for it. Nate was quiet for a moment, staring into his beer. She really is worried, you know. She asked me to keep an eye on you, make sure you're okay. How thoughtful of her. Ethan, come on. Whatever's going on between you two, you can work it out. You love each other. I looked at my oldest friend, this decent, trusting man who still believed in happy endings and the basic goodness of people. Part of me envied his innocence. Part of me wanted to protect it. Yeah, I said, I'm sure we'll figure it out. But as I walked home that night, I knew we wouldn't, because Julia wasn't worried about me, she was worried about herself, worried that her carefully constructed double life was starting to crack, worried that her convenient, reliable husband might be developing a backbone. She was right to be worried. The next morning, I woke up to find Julia already gone. No note, no text, just the lingering scent of her expensive perfume and the faint aroma of coffee she hadn't bothered to offer me. I made my own breakfast and headed to work, where my boss, Mr. Phelps, was waiting with his usual expression of barely contained irritation. Rowe, we need to talk. Harold Phelps was 62 years old, built like a fire hydrant, and had the social skills of a parking meter. But he was fair, and he knew good work when he saw it. I followed him into his office, wondering what fresh crisis awaited. I got a call yesterday, he said, settling behind his desk like a toad on a lily pad. From your wife. My stomach dropped. Oh? She's concerned about your mental health. Says you've been acting erratic at home, wanted to know if we'd noticed any changes in your work performance. I kept my expression neutral, but inside I was seething. Julia had actually called my boss, actually tried to plant seeds of doubt about my stability. The manipulation was breathtaking in its audacity. What did you tell her? I told her your work has been exemplary, as always, but I'm telling you this because it struck me as odd. In 15 years of managing people, I've never had a spouse call to discuss an employee's mental health. Usually they call to complain about overtime or ask about vacation policies. Phelps leaned back in his chair, studying me with sharp eyes. You want to tell me what's really going on? I considered my options. Phelps wasn't the type for personal drama, but he also wasn't stupid. If Julia was going to play dirty, I needed allies. My marriage is having some difficulties, I said carefully. I think Julia is trying to control the narrative. Control it how? By making me look unstable, unreliable, like I'm having some kind of breakdown. Phelps nodded slowly. Classic gaslighting technique. My ex-wife tried the same thing during our divorce. Started telling people I was drinking too much, staying out all night, neglecting my responsibilities. None of it was true, but it didn't matter. Perception became reality. What did you do? I documented everything. Every conversation, every incident, every attempt to undermine me. By the time we got to court, I had a paper trail that told the real story. He leaned forward. My advice? Start keeping records and watch your back. If she's calling your workplace, she's escalating. That afternoon, I started a private file on my personal laptop. Every strange conversation, every late night, every time Julia came home smelling like Dean's cologne. I included dates, times, and as many details as I could remember. It felt paranoid, but Phelps was right. If Julia wanted to play games, I needed to be prepared. My research led me to some interesting discoveries. The gym where Julia and Dean worked out together, Elite Fitness, had a very active social media presence. I scrolled through their Instagram posts and found several photos from recent events. There was Julia, looking radiant in designer workout clothes, standing very close to Dean at a charity fundraiser. His hand was on her lower back, and they were both laughing at something off-camera. The comments were illuminating. Cute couple. Are you two married? Relationship goals. You guys look so happy together. Julia had liked several of these comments, but hadn't bothered to correct the assumption that she and Dean were a couple. Interesting. I dug deeper, checking Dean's social media profiles. Dean Malice was 35, divorced, and apparently very proud of his fitness regimen. His Instagram was full of shirtless gym selfies and motivational quotes about winning in life and taking what's yours. He'd recently posted a photo from an expensive restaurant downtown with the caption, "Celebrating new beginnings with someone special." The photo showed 2 wine glasses and a candlelit table, but no faces. The timestamp showed it was posted last Tuesday night, the same Tuesday night Julia had claimed to be working late on the Henderson account. My phone rang. Nate. "Hey man, how are you feeling today?" "Fine. Why?" Julia asked me to check on you. She's worried you might be having some kind of episode." There it was again, the mental health angle. Julia was really committed to this narrative. "What kind of episode?" She didn't get specific, just said you've been acting paranoid and antisocial. She thinks you might need professional help. I closed my laptop and walked to the window of my office, looking down at the busy street below. People hurried along the sidewalks, lost in their own dramas and complications. How many of them were dealing with cheating spouses? How many were being slowly, systematically gaslit by the person they trusted most? "Nate, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you remember what Julia was like when we first started dating?" "Yeah, of course. She was great, funny, smart, really into you. Why?" "Do you think she's changed?" There was a long pause. "I guess everyone changes a little bit. Marriage, career pressure, you know?" "That's not what I mean." Another pause, longer this time. "Ethan, what are you getting at?" "Never mind. Thanks for checking on me." "Wait, don't hang up. Talk to me. What's really going on?" I looked at my reflection in the window glass. 33 years old, brown hair that was starting to thin, glasses that needed updating, the pale complexion of someone who spent too much time indoors. Not exactly the kind of man who inspired passionate affairs or desperate schemes, but apparently I was worth manipulating. "I think my wife is having an affair," I said. Silence. "Nate? I'm here. Are you sure?" "Pretty sure." "With who?" "Dean Malice." "The guy from her work? The fitness fanatic?" "That's the one." "Man, that's heavy. Have you talked to her about it?" "Not directly, but I've been watching, paying attention, and the more I see, the more convinced I become." "What are you going to do?" Good question. What was I going to do? The old Ethan would have confronted Julia directly, demanded explanations, probably ended up apologizing for being suspicious. But the old Ethan was gone. In his place was someone harder, smarter, more calculating, someone who had learned to play the game. "I'm going to find out the truth," I said. Elite Fitness was the kind of place where people went to see and be seen as much as to actually exercise. All gleaming equipment and floor-to-ceiling mirrors, with a juice bar that served $20 smoothies and a clientele that looked like they'd stepped out of a fitness magazine. I'd never been inside before, but I had a plan. Rico Martinez, the gym manager, was a friend of a friend from college. We'd met at a few parties over the years, and he'd always struck me as a straight shooter. More importantly, he was the type of guy who noticed things. And according to his Facebook profile, he was not a fan of Dean Malice. "Ethan, what brings you to my temple of fitness?" Rico grinned as I approached the front desk. He was built like a linebacker, but had the demeanor of a golden retriever, all enthusiasm and good humor. "Thinking about joining," I lied smoothly. "Mind if I look around?" "Absolutely. Let me give you the grand tour." As Rico showed me around the facility, I kept my eyes open for any sign of Julia or Dean. The gym was busy with the after-work crowd, and I recognized several faces from Julia's social media posts. The atmosphere was competitive, almost predatory. Everyone was checking everyone else out, sizing up potential rivals or conquests. "So," I said casually as we passed the free weights section, "my wife Julia works out here. Julia Rowe? She's mentioned this place is pretty social." Rico's expression shifted slightly. "Yeah, I know Julia. Nice lady. Very dedicated to her fitness routine. She usually comes with her colleague Dean, right? Dean Malice?" Now Rico's face darkened. "Yeah, I know Dean too." "Not a fan?" Rico glanced around, then leaned closer. "Look, I try to stay out of member drama, but that guy is trouble. He treats this place like his personal hunting ground, always hitting on the female members, always trying to establish some kind of alpha male dominance thing. It's obnoxious." "Hunting ground?" "You know what I mean. Married women seem to be his specialty. He's got this whole routine about being their fitness mentor and workout partner. Very hands-on approach, if you know what I mean." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Hands-on how? Lots of correcting their form, lots of spotting during exercises that don't really require spotting, lots of private conversations in the sauna. Rico shook his head. "I've had to talk to him a few times about appropriate behavior." "And Julia?" Rico looked uncomfortable. Listen, man, I like you. We've always gotten along. But maybe this isn't a conversation we should be having. Rico, I need to know. He sighed. They're here together a lot. More than just workout partners, if you catch my drift. They disappear into the private training rooms for extended periods. They're very touchy. And the way they look at each other... He trailed off. The way they look at each other? Like they're sharing secrets. Like they're in on something together. I thanked Rico and left the gym with my head spinning. The confirmation of what I'd suspected should have felt like a victory, but instead it felt like a punch to the gut. Julia wasn't just having an affair. She was flaunting it in public, letting Dean paw at her in front of strangers, building a whole separate life that didn't include me. But if she wanted to play games, I could play games too. The next morning, I called in sick to work and spent the day researching Dean Malice, social media profiles, professional background, financial records that were publicly available. What I found was fascinating. Dean had been married twice, both marriages ending in messy divorces. His first wife had accused him of emotional manipulation and financial abuse. His second wife had filed a restraining order, claiming he'd stalked and harassed her after she'd asked for a separation. The restraining order had been dropped eventually, but the court records were still accessible online. More interesting was his financial situation. Despite his expensive lifestyle and flashy social media presence, Dean was leveraged to the hilt. Credit card debt, car loans, a mortgage that was underwater. He was living paycheck to paycheck while projecting an image of success and prosperity. A man in that situation might be very motivated to find a wealthy spouse. And Julia, with her marketing executive salary and half ownership of our downtown apartment, would be quite a catch. My phone buzzed with a text from Julia. Working late again tonight. Don't wait up. I texted back, no problem. Enjoy your work. But instead of staying home, I drove to Elite Fitness and parked across the street. At 7:30, Julia's BMW pulled into the parking lot, followed closely by Dean's flashy red Corvette. They walked into the gym together, Julia's hand briefly touching Dean's arm as he held the door for her. I waited. 2 hours later, they emerged, both looking flushed and satisfied. But instead of getting into separate cars, they stood talking in the parking lot for another 20 minutes. The conversation looked intense, intimate. At one point, Dean pulled Julia close and whispered something in her ear that made her laugh and playfully push him away. Then Dean kissed her, not a friendly peck on the cheek. A real kiss, passionate and lingering. Julia melted into it, her arms wrapping around his neck like she'd done it 1,000 times before. I sat in my car, watching my wife kiss another man, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. The last remnants of the old Ethan, the trusting, accommodating husband who always gave people the benefit of the doubt, crumbled away. In his place was someone harder, someone who understood that nice guys didn't just finish last, they got played, manipulated, and discarded when they were no longer useful. Julia wanted to play games? Fine, game on. I spent the weekend planning. Julia was working, and at the gym, which gave me time to prepare. If I confronted her and Dean directly, they'd play the victim. Subtlety was key. Monday, I visited Mr. Phelps. I think Julia's going to escalate, I said. She might try to make me look unstable. He frowned. You think she's working with someone? Maybe. Someone with a reason to discredit me. Be careful, Rowe. If you're right, this could get ugly. He had no idea. That afternoon, Nate texted, Julia wants to meet. Says she's worried about you. Perfect. At Cafe Luna, he kept me updated. She's calling you paranoid. Now she's crying. Says she's scared of you. Then, she showed me threatening texts from you. What texts? I asked. Nate read them aloud. Things I'd never written. I checked my phone. They weren't there. She faked them, I said. She's setting me up. Nate hesitated. Why would she do that? She's having an affair with Dean Malice. He went silent. I need you to play along, I told him. Let her think you believe her. I need to know what she's planning. He didn't like it, but he agreed. That night Julia came home early, tense. We need to talk, she said, about your angry texts. I haven't sent you any. She showed me her phone, the same fake messages, slightly off font, mismatched timestamps. Julia, I said quietly, these are fake. She froze. What? These messages. They're fabricated. Look at the formatting. Look at the timestamps. Someone created these to make me look bad. Her face went pale. That's impossible. Is it? There are apps that can create fake text conversations, screenshots that look completely authentic but show messages that were never actually sent. You're being paranoid. Am I, or am I being set up? Julia stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the calculation in her eyes. She was trying to figure out how much I knew, how much I suspected. "I think you need help," she said finally. "I think you're right," I replied, "but not the kind of help you're thinking of." That night, after Julia went to bed, I sat in my office and planned my next move. She wanted to play dirty. She wanted to fabricate evidence and manipulate our friends. Two could play that game, and I was about to prove that I was much better at it than she was. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Elite Fitness was hosting their annual Wellness Weekend, a 2-day event featuring fitness demonstrations, nutrition seminars, and guest speakers. According to their website, Dean was scheduled to give a presentation on advanced training techniques on Saturday afternoon. More importantly, the event was being live-streamed on the gym's social media channels. I spent Thursday evening preparing, a quick trip to a pharmacy across town, paying cash for a bottle of magnesium citrate, a powerful but harmless laxative commonly used for medical procedures. A stop at a computer store for a small Bluetooth speaker and a prepaid phone. A visit to a costume shop for a baseball cap and fake mustache that would help me blend in with the crowd. Friday night, Julia announced she'd be spending most of Saturday at the gym for the wellness event. "Dean is giving a presentation," she said, unable to keep the pride out of her voice. "It's a big deal for him." "I'm sure it is," I replied. Saturday morning, I arrived at Elite Fitness an hour before the event started. The parking lot was already crowded with cars, and I could see camera crews setting up inside. Perfect. I'd called ahead, using a fake name, to volunteer as event support staff. Rico had been grateful for the extra help, especially since several volunteers had called in sick. He handed me a staff t-shirt and a clipboard, and suddenly I was part of the team. "Can you help with the refreshment station?" Rico asked. "We've got protein shakes and energy bars for the presenters." "Absolutely." The refreshment area was set up behind the main presentation space, out of sight of the cameras but with easy access to the stage. I spent the morning arranging bottles of water and protein powder, chatting with other volunteers, and waiting for my moment. At noon, Dean arrived, looking every inch the fitness influencer in his designer workout clothes and perfectly styled hair. He was accompanied by Julia, who was dressed in an outfit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. They were both glowing with excitement and self-importance. "Ethan?" Julia's voice was sharp with surprise. "What are you doing here?" "Volunteering," I said, gesturing to my staff shirt. "Thought I'd help out with the community event." "Since when do you volunteer?" "Since I decided to get more involved in fitness. This seemed like a good place to start." Dean extended his hand. "You must be Ethan. I've heard so much about you." I shook his hand, noting his unnecessarily firm grip and the way his eyes never quite met mine. "All good things, I hope." "Of course." His smile was perfect and completely fake. "Julia talks about you all the time." "Funny, she never mentions you." The smile flickered for just a moment. "Well, we try to keep work and personal life separate." "How professional of you." Julia stepped between us. "Dean, don't you need to get ready for your presentation?" "Right. Ethan, nice meeting you. Enjoy the show." As they walked away, I heard Julia whisper urgently to Dean, but I couldn't make out the words. It didn't matter. I had work to do. Dean's presentation was scheduled for 2 p.m. At 1:30, I prepared his post-workout protein shake, using the premium blend he'd specifically requested. The magnesium citrate was tasteless and odorless, dissolving completely into the chocolate-flavored powder. The presentation began right on time. Dean took the stage with the confidence of a man who'd never doubted his own importance, launching into a speech about maximizing your physical potential and breaking through mental barriers. The audience was eating it up, and the cameras were capturing every moment. 20 minutes in, Dean paused to take a drink from his protein shake. 30 minutes in, he was starting to look uncomfortable, shifting from foot to foot and occasionally pressing his hand to his stomach. 40 minutes in, sweat was beading on his forehead, and his voice was becoming strained. At the 45-minute mark, Dean suddenly stopped mid-sentence, his eyes widening with panic. He mumbled something about needing a quick break and rushed off stage, moving faster than I'd ever seen him move before. The audience murmured in confusion. The cameras kept rolling, and I slipped out of the building, removing my staff shirt and fake mustache in the parking lot. By evening, the video had gone viral. Fitness influencer has epic meltdown. During live presentation was trending on 3 different social media platforms. The footage of Dean's panicked exit had been viewed over 50,000 times, with comments ranging from sympathetic to merciless. Guess all those supplements finally caught up with him. This is why I don't trust fitness gurus. Poor guy, but also hilarious. Someone needs to check what he puts in those protein shakes. My phone rang. Julia. Did you see what happened to Dean? Her voice was tight with stress. No, what happened? He got sick during his presentation. Really sick. It was humiliating. That's terrible. Food poisoning? We don't know. He thinks someone might have tampered with his drink. Who would do something like that? I don't know, but when I find out, they're going to regret it. I'm sure you'll get to the bottom of it, I said. These things usually have simple explanations. After I hung up, I sat back in my chair and smiled for the first time in weeks. Dean's humiliation was just the beginning. I had bigger plans, and thanks to his viral meltdown, he was about to become a lot less attractive to my wife. The old Ethan would have felt guilty about what I'd done. But the old Ethan was gone, replaced by someone who understood that sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. And this fire was just getting started. The fallout from Dean's presentation disaster was swift and merciless. By Monday morning, Elite Fitness had quietly removed him from their roster of featured trainers. By Tuesday, his corporate sponsors had begun distancing themselves from the unreliable fitness personality. By Wednesday, Julia was barely speaking to me, convinced somehow that I was responsible for her boyfriend's downfall. She wasn't wrong. I know it was you, she said Thursday evening, cornering me in our kitchen. Her eyes were red-rimmed from crying, and her usually perfect appearance was disheveled. I know you did something to Dean. I have no idea what you're talking about. Don't lie to me. You were at the gym that day. You volunteered just so you could sabotage him. I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. The woman I'd married 4 years ago had been ambitious, but kind, competitive, but fair. This person was something else entirely. Desperate. Dangerous. Julia, you're being paranoid. Am I? Or am I finally seeing you clearly? She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. You've been watching us, following us, planning this whole thing. Us? The word hung in the air between us like a loaded weapon. Julia's face went pale as she realized what she'd revealed. I meant Dean and the other trainers at the gym. No, you didn't. We stared at each other in silence. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, and the first drops of rain began pattering against the windows. I want a divorce, Julia said finally. I figured you did. I want half of everything. The apartment, the savings, the investments. Of course you do. And I want you to know that everyone will hear about what you've become, how paranoid and controlling and vindictive you are, how you sabotaged an innocent man because of your own insecurities. I nodded slowly. Is that the story you're going with? It's the truth. Really, because I have a different version of the truth. I walked to my laptop and opened a folder I'd been preparing for weeks. Screenshots of social media posts, credit card statements showing expensive dinners for two, hotel receipts, photos from the gym's Instagram account showing Julia and Dean together at various events. What is this? Julia's voice was barely a whisper. Evidence, documentation, the real story of what's been happening in our marriage? She scrolled through the files, her face growing paler with each image. You've been spying on me. I've been paying attention. There's a difference. This is illegal. Stalking. Harassment. Actually, it's not. Everything here is from public sources or joint accounts. I haven't hacked anything, stolen anything, or violated any laws. I closed the laptop. But you have. What are you talking about? The fake text messages. The ones you showed Nate to make me look threatening and unstable. Creating false evidence is fraud, Julia. It's also defamation. Her face crumpled. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did go this far. You chose to escalate. You chose to try to destroy my reputation to cover up your affair. It wasn't supposed to be like this. She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. Dean said you'd never figure it out. He said you were too trusting, too passive. Dean said that, did he? He said we could make you look unstable, maybe even get you committed for psychiatric evaluation. Then I could divorce you on grounds of mental illness and keep most of the assets. I felt something cold and final settle in my chest. You were going to have me committed. It wasn't my idea. But you went along with it. Julia collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Outside, the storm was intensifying, rain lashing against the windows and lightning illuminating the darkened sky. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. No, you're not. You're sorry you got caught. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Meet me at your apartment in 1 hour. Come alone. Dean. I showed the message to Julia. Did you tell him I figured it out? She nodded miserably. What's he planning? I don't know. He's been acting strange since the presentation thing. Paranoid, angry. He thinks you're going to ruin his life. His life is already ruined. He did that himself. He doesn't see it that way. Another text? I know you're there with her. We're coming up. We? I looked at Julia. Who else is with him? Before she could answer, there was a loud pounding on our apartment door. Then Dean's voice, slurred and aggressive. Open up! I know you're in there. I looked out the peephole and saw Dean standing in the hallway, soaking wet from the rain. He was swaying slightly, and his eyes had the glassy look of someone who'd been drinking. Behind him stood another man I didn't recognize. Bigger, meaner looking, with the kind of build that suggested he solved problems with his fists. Julia, I said quietly, call the police. I can't. Dean will tell everyone about us. My career, my reputation. Your career is already over. Your reputation is already destroyed. The only question now is whether we get out of this safely. The pounding intensified. I know what you did, Dean shouted. You think you're so smart, but I figured it out. You poisoned me. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, but Dean's voice cut through the storm. I disconnected your landline, and I've got a signal jammer. Your cell phone won't work. He was right. My phone showed no bars. But here's the thing, Dean continued, his voice taking on a manic edge. I've been live streaming this whole conversation on my backup phone. Everyone can hear what's happening. So if you don't open this door and face me like a man, the whole world is going to know what a coward you are. I looked at Julia, who was huddled in her chair, shaking. Outside, lightning flashed and thunder crashed, as if the storm itself was building to some terrible climax. Open the door, Ethan, Dean called. Let's finish this. I walked to the door, my hand hovering over the lock. Everything had led to this moment. All the lies, the manipulation, the games. Julia had made her choice. Dean had chosen his path. Now I had to choose mine. I turned the lock and opened the door. Dean stood there in the hallway, water dripping from his hair, his eyes wild with rage and desperation. Behind him, his friend cracked his knuckles menacingly. Hello, Dean, I said calmly. I've been expecting you. And as the thunder crashed overhead, I smiled, because I had one final surprise for both of them. The security cameras I'd installed last week were recording everything. The police were already on their way, called by my neighbor who'd heard the shouting, and Dean's own live stream was about to capture his final, spectacular downfall. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting your enemies destroy themselves. Come on in, I said, stepping aside. Let's talk. The storm raged on, but inside our apartment, everything was about to become perfectly clear.